I'm Mary Owens with Owens Estate and Wealth Strategies Group. Welcome to our economic update for spring of 2019. Now this time we're going to focus a lot of our attention on real estate. Our additional video we're going to be showing this time is on fire issue, fire prevention, and some of the solutions. But one of the most impactful areas that fire has is obviously on the value of real estate and its ability to be built and related issues. So this time we're going to start out with a real estate update instead of our typical economic update. So in this very first slide, I want you to start out by understanding the dynamics of what's going on in the current housing industry nationwide, not just necessarily on the West Coast where the fires are more predominant. Now, nationwide, we have an unusual situation going on. We have a chart up right now, which is new U.S. Homes being sold and existing homes being sold. Now, normally there is a close correlation to new homes being sold and existing homes being sold. But you'll notice on this chart about 2010, there started to be a very strong deviation from the pattern. And that is because the United States is not building enough new homes. And because of this, we have all sorts of odd issues going on right now in the United States housing market. Now, the first thing I want to point out is we are at an unusually low home ownership rate. Well, that's pretty obvious why. It's very difficult to own a home when the prices are going up rapidly and when there is actually housing shortages. Now, to understand what's going on, we have a chart here. And these are U.S. structures built by decade. Now, this particular chart, however, includes more than just houses. These are commercial office buildings, these are apartments, but overwhelmingly, on a proportional basis, homes are its number one issue. Now, these numbers here are not population adjusted. So you'll notice homes and structures built after 2010 through 2017 is disproportionately low. We are only now just beginning to hit the number of structures built that was built in the decades of the 1940s. Well, we were still trying to climb out of the Great Depression. As you can well imagine, the population is 3 times what it was in the 40s. So the issue, why are housing prices going up? And why are existing home sales outselling new home sales? Because we aren't building enough things. We are disproportionately behind, and the disproportion is growing relative to the population. We have 2 generations right now, back to back, that are enormous, and they are in the middle of household formation. Now, the next group, millennials, would have normally started household formation in 2010. And why didn't they? We just had the Great Recession. We're at the bottom of the economic cycle. They stayed at home. Fortunately, they saved. They were faced with harder, more strict standards for getting a mortgage loan. So they had to come up with more down, which was healthy long-term for the U.S. economy. So millennials started late. They really didn't start buying houses until about 2016. But now they are in full force. These 2 generations compose over 50% of the U.S. population right now. So we are going to have abnormally high demand for housing for decades to come. And we need to fix this problem of not building enough houses. So it's very clear when you go look at U.S. existing home inventory, it's very low. In the entirety of the United States, as of March 31st, there was only 1,680,000 homes for sale in all of the U.S. And many of those, when they went up for market, went to sale very quickly. Now, because of the shortage, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out either that the U.S. median home price is considerably rising every single year, and it has ever since 2011. It is now significantly higher than it was in the last bubble of 2006. And we really don't see that abating because the demand is strong and the supply is low. So the next area we want to talk about are housing starts, because there's our supply number. Now again, this chart is not population adjusted. So you'll notice right now, for our peak, supposed peak in rises in the number of housing starts we've had since 2010, we are still substandard to all the decades clear back to the 60s. And our population right now, in many cases, has doubled, and the number of people wanting to buy a house is significantly higher than it has been in any previous decade on this chart. So housing starts need to be addressed. So a lot of the news has indicated, well, the reason we don't have more people buying homes is they're too much in debt. And that is a misnomer. We have right now one of the lowest household debt service ratios we've had in over 35 years. So the debt issue is not overall the cause of the problem. We have many qualified buyers that simply can't find a home. Now, when we look at this, we're going to have to look at the obvious issues. We have way too many buyers that are going after too few moderately priced houses. And in California, a moderately priced house is very difficult to build, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So in California, the projections for 2019, they're expected to build about 113,000 to maybe 125,000 new housing units this year. That's enough to keep up with the population growth, but it's not enough to be able to begin to address the existing backlog. Now, of those, 65,000 are expected to be single-family homes, and 55,000 are expected to be multiple family units, like apartment buildings. If the situation of not enough homes being built in California is not addressed, California will become a majority renter state by 2025. Now, complicating this right now is the obvious issue. If you live in a rural community, getting fire insurance is extraordinarily difficult. So many of the people who traditionally, as they retire, move out of the Bay Area and LA and those very urban, high populated urban areas and move to the foothills, right now are finding their dream of moving is being challenged because of the lackability of fire insurance. So last year was not a robust year for construction. Clearly, we had underbuilding once again, with only 120,000 units being built in 2019. But the additional problem we're going to have is 20% of the spending of 2019 is going to come from projects that will start this year, and 80% of the spending is actually going to come from projects that have been in the pipeline, in many cases, for years and years, while developers attempt to get them through the process of being approved and started. So our other impacts, as I mentioned, were fire danger. When we first looked at the initial fires that started in California, people did not realize at the time how significant they were going to be. We all think of just rural areas, but now we have to realize it's not limited to that. Santa Rosa, the Berkeley Hill fires, Malibu, they've all proven that all developments are potentially at risk for fire. And the most important thing to realize is the impact we have on availability of housing. Of the 5 large wildfires we had in 2018, across 6 counties, 21,000 housing units were burnt to the ground on those fires. And they represented 85% of all new housing that had been built in those areas over the last decade. So when we talk about major fires, they have an enormous impact on the shortage of housing. Let's also start to look at and understand the dynamics of what's happening outside of rural California and inside the urban environments that are also driving this issue. So we have right now population growth in many of the well-known urban areas. But then we have next to it the labor force growth. The labor force growth in many of the urban areas is significantly higher than the population growth. So if we take a look at San Jose actually had a growth for a 3-year period in the labor force of 51%, yet their population during that period of time only grew 33%. Where did these people go? Outside those areas. So you'll notice that the impact is also in other urban areas like Oakland. Oakland grew by 73% in population, but its labor force only grew by 51%. Now, what is the impact of all of this? We are seeing more and more communities that are having commuters, and those communities are getting further and further out. So we're having commute times now into urban areas that are, in my view, just intolerable. So we have a lot of dysfunction going on right now in the United States. We are becoming a state of massive commuter time on the road. It is not uncommon for some Bay Area and LA folks to commute over 3 hours every day. Now, as those folks retire, do they want to get out of that traffic? Absolutely. And where are they headed? To the rural areas. And again, rural areas, as that happens, the shortage there is skyrocketing. And the second impact is rental rates are also going up with the impact. We have so many people now that are going after moderately priced housing. So we have people moving in from outside the area, and then we have two young generations that are also attempting to buy houses. The millennials and Gen Z, also known as digital natives. They are being stuck in rental houses longer. Why? Because they cannot save fast enough to keep up with the housing price appreciation. And they're in a situation now where young people are doubling up in houses just so they can save more. And with that, rental rates are skyrocketing. And when you have large communities burned down, what do they look for? Rental houses as they attempt to rebuild their houses. So we're having a situation right now, both housing prices are going up, and so is rental rates going up. So let's go and look at right now what's happening out there in California when it comes to the increase in prices since the bottom of the market. And you'll notice California, since the bottom of the market, which was determined to be for housing around 2011 or 12, they're up 7.7%. You'll notice many rural communities like Nevada County is above that. It's up 9%. Then you see Santa Clara is up 12.4%. Why is Santa Clara up 12.4%? Because they're one of the ones that generated more jobs than they generated more housing units. So those areas are going up faster. As you'll notice, some of the more rural areas have not had the price appreciation because they are still able to what? Build more affordable housing and spread out, and their prices aren't going up as quickly. Now let's also take a look again once more at the misnomer that we have a lot of young people that can't afford a house because they have so much debt. You'll notice earlier I talked about the household debt ratio being so low, for as low as it's been in decades. But you hear in the press that the amount of debt overall is going up. Well, of course it is. The debt overall is going up because the population's going up. And as the population goes up, of course, the amount of debt being carried by the citizens of the nation go up. So let's take a look at this. The gold area are mortgages. It's overwhelmingly the largest amount of the household debt that's out there. And then after that, you'll notice that we have household revolving credit. That's the blue line. And we have auto loans, which is the green line. And we have student loans, which is the red line. Now, are student loans going up higher relative to the past? Yes, they are. But as a proportion overall of the household debt, they're still not preventing people from buying houses. Overall issue, it's the price of the house that has a far bigger impact than the debt load. Now, the other issue I want to cover is part of the problem in California is we can't build affordable housing. It's a misnomer. It's difficult to even build moderate-priced housing. And why is that? That's because we have something in California called the GAN limit. The GAN limit is what came into being after the passage of Prop 13 in the 70s. And basically the GAN limit says, guess what? I get all your property taxes to the state, and counties I'm going to give them back to you, and cities and I'm going to give them back to you, and the school districts. But the state overwhelmingly keeps the vast majority of your property taxes now. So to replace the need for services at the local level, the GAN limit required counties and cities to charge what's known as mitigation fees, a mitigation for the providing of service. And what is that service? It is approving building permits, grading permits, engineering studies, and the like. It's also the fee to impact for the expansions of schools, fire districts, etc. Now the problem was, in the past, those entities became so dependent on mitigation fees for their support and survival of their delivery of service that those fees kept going up and up and up. And now what do we have? We have situations in California right now. It is not uncommon to build a moderate price house. You may have mitigation fees in excess of $70,000 before you even turn dirt. That's why affordable housing is not possible to be built in our state. So employment in the United States, it's stellar. We have unemployment rate right now, the U3 of only 3.6%. This is an historic low. Hasn't been this low in over 50 years. And it looks like at this point in time, it's still headed downward. Now, we also usually talk about the U6 rate. Now, U6 also includes people who are working part-time who want to be working full-time. It is also dropping and is historically low at 7.3. Now, what's notable about this, we had a large portion of the U.S. workforce that was not actively in the workforce. They gave up. They weren't looking for work. They decided, I'm going to quasi-retire. And we're now seeing those people re-enter the workforce. Thousands are coming back in each month into the United States workforce. And what's so encouraging is, even with those people coming back in and the significant immigration that we have, unemployment, both on the U3, which is at 3.6, and the U6 is 7.3, continues to go down. That is just historic in proportions on economic data. So let's briefly look at some other major economic indicators. We have up there the leading economic indicators in the United States. They are still very strong and continuing to go higher. We put up here a U.S. recession risk indicator. Now we're putting this up because the number one question I get asked most often is, are we going into a recession? The reading about that concerns in a lot of the press. So we frequently have signs well in advance of a recession of what starts to turn on what we call our caution lights. So you'll notice in the far left-hand column, which says current, anything with a green arrow says it's pedal to the metal. There is no sign of a recession. We have a few items that are slowing: wage growth, commodity prices are going down, and money supply is a cautionary issue. And that we really think that's because we have so much money pouring into the United States from foreign currencies, because the US dollar is so strong that it's affecting both the yield curves and the money supply. So at this point in time, there are no imminent economic indicators that said we're going to be in a recession this year. We think it's highly unlikely we'd ever have, if we have one in 2020, that it would be a significant recession. However, I will caution, if there is a reason we would go into one, it's most likely going to be caused by the impacts of either trade wars, which I think both sides lose if that happens. I think the United States and China both have enormous responsibilities and consequences if they don't settle their differences. But the other area that I am putting my eye on is Europe. Europe is looking very weak, and we already have some countries there that are going into a recession or on the edge of it. Those are the two areas that we're watching most carefully. But in the United States, right now it looks good. Inflation is still very low. We have, when we look at our situation of unemployment relative to other countries, it's also very low. We are at 3.6%. The only countries that are lower than us are India at 3.53, and Mexico at 3.2, and Japan at 2.5. But the majority of countries around the world, we're the envy. We're the ones that are wishing that they could emulate. So Spain, for example, is still at a stunning 14.7. So we look at gross domestic product growth, GDP growth. We are still doing very well relative to everyone else. Matter of fact, we are leading the pack in the United States. Please, if you've got any questions, give us an email or give us a call. Thank you so much.